This past Sunday, we looked at another story from Jesus that gives us another layer of this big picture about who God is and who God made you and me to be. Jesus tells this famous story that we call the Good Samaritan. And Jesus tells the story because everybody was concerned, and this guy in the story was very concerned about who's in and who's out of heaven. They were very concerned about what it takes to get into heaven and how much you have to do and how far you have to go and what you shouldn't do and how far you shouldn't go in order to get into heaven. Now I know we don't tend to talk about that much, and maybe we don't use that same language, but we do use the language of setting limits, where we set limits for ourselves of how much do I have to do to be a good person? How much do I have to serve a person in order to be considered good? What do I have to do for God to love me? Those are all limits, and those are also in and out limits. Am I in or am I out of a relationship with God? Jesus seems to say as we go through the story that limits are something that Jesus kind of resets. Jesus seems to completely mess up this guy's limits, and Jesus seems to say at the end of it all to love without limits. To look at people as though there are no limits of who's in and who's out. There are no categories of I shouldn't love this person and I should love this person because they're in or out of heaven. Jesus says, don't talk about those limits. Love without limits. And the question comes up, well, why does Jesus even say this? And why is this so important to understand about God and about ourselves? Why is this limits thing of who's in and who's out? Why is this so important? And it seems to be because God has already loved you and me without any limits. Because if God set up limits for who God was going to love, you better believe none of us are going to make it inside those limits. So if God is willing to love you and me without limits, then what does that mean for how we love other people? Jesus said love without limits. This coming Sunday, we turn to another story of Jesus. This one we call the prodigal son, or the lost son. And again, Jesus gives us something critical that we need to get inside us about who God is, and it impacts who He made us to be.